Welcome to the Bucher and Friends podcast, co-starring 10-year NBA center Ryan Hollins.
Couple bump fakes, leans in, shot blocked by Ryan Hollins. Hollins sent that into the third row.
6 rebounds and 8 assists.
Hollins climbs the stairs.
Down the floor. Ryan Hollins! He is the high jumper!
That's what I want to see. Give me some gunpowder and throw the hammer down.
And now, here is your host,
Let's send it over to Ric Bucher.
Ric Bucher.
Welcome to another edition of Bucher and Hollins, subsidiary of Bucher and Friends, part of the United WeCast network. I'm Ric Bucher. You can see me on FS1. You can read me on Bleacher Report, and you can follow me on Twitter at Ric Bucher. He's Ryan Hollins. You can see him on ESPN, TNT, Clippers broadcasts. You can follow him on Twitter at the Ryan Hollins. You can find him on Instagram at simply Ryan Hollins. All right. So the big news is, the biggest news as of right now in the playoffs, I would say, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, that we have a Game 7 between the Spurs and the Nuggets. Is this just extending the inevitable, or are you anticipating a potential upset by the San Antonio Spurs?
Can you honestly call that an upset? Like, would you really validate this as an upset? The Spurs beating the young Nuggets team? Because
Well,
the way you phrase the question,
It's 2 versus 7, so technically it is an upset. And they won the Nuggets won the pivotal Game 5, and they have home court advantage. So, yeah, all things considered, it feels more like maybe a 6 beating a 3 or a 5 beating a 4 because of the distinction that you make. But yeah, it still qualifies as an upset, no?
I wouldn't at all. I mean, if anything, we've been saying all season long that the Nuggets were the team you wanted to target for, and as thick as the West was, like if it was the Eastern Conference, the bottom 4 in the East, we go, oh man, they don't have a shot. This is ugly, and we've essentially seen that play out. But you just see the depth of the West, and you really got to take your hat off to the job that Mike Malone has done because they played hard as heck. They play as a team. They defend. They follow the scouting report, and that's really good for the regular season, but that does not ensure playoff success.
Here's the tricky part for me. We've talked about this a lot when it comes to the Nuggets and Nikola Jokic, however you want to pronounce it, and where we put him in the hierarchy of great players in the league right now. And I've always said this. When a guy goes and gets big numbers, but his team does not win, in fact, they get blown out, as it happened tonight, I'm just a little slower in anointing that guy. Now, he's talented. There's no doubt about it. I mean, he's a really unique big man. There's a lot that I respect and admire. I think he's a thinking man's basketball player. But I don't know. Maybe it's because I've been conditioned to the athletic game now. He doesn't dominate in a conventional sense, if that makes sense. I mean, the guy that he reminds me a lot of is Tim Duncan in terms of doing everything. But even Duncan, it felt as if he had a more dominating presence than Jokic. Am I way off here? And I may be, but there's just something that I'm trying hard to wrap my arms around Nikola Jokic being everything that everybody's saying that he is, because I'm slow to get there.
I think you're way off when you essentially throw out Tim Duncan. He's Marc Gasol, but that's the European style of basketball. Nikola's he's been programmed to make the correct basketball play every time down the floor. If the guard is trailing, he hands it off and sets a screen. If he goes under, he sets a little step up screen. He's going to make the correct play. Right. But it's Marc Gasol. But the thing is, Marc was a little more aggressive. He's bigger than Marc, but you almost have to force Nikola to say, man, force tempo, be aggressive, kind of make yourself the first option, then go play make. And he does it out the post, but not so much on the perimeter. And San Antonio really said, you know what, we're going to live with you popping back and shooting threes. And he made them pay tonight. But what happened was they cut off Gary Harris. They cut off, all those other guys, and that's just made it tough. But Jokic is not necessarily a guy that wants to go out and score big numbers. But
right.
If I'm another player, another star, he's an appeal to go play with because he's going to get you wide open looks. Yeah. But I'm not looking at him saying, "Man, you're a number one." Right. He's a really good basketball player.
Well, and the reason that I compared him to Duncan is because Duncan didn't overwhelm you with his physical abilities, or at least his athleticism. He was a thinking man's player. He was always in the right place. He could do everything. He was a passer, obviously defended well, set great screens, could roll, could finish with either hand. That's the comparison. I'm not putting him in the Tim Duncan camp by any stretch, but that's what he reminds me of as far as being a guy who beats you with just his all-around skill, as opposed to he's going to beast you. And Tim at times would put guys under the rim, but that's the reason for the comparison, not a full-on, simply because of how they succeed.
Tim is a closer, though, bro. Tim is a closer, so we're not gonna put those two in the same.
He became a closer, and you know what else is unfair is the fact that Tim had the right pieces around him. And I don't know that Jokic quite has that. I think they're still missing a piece or two.
Oh, I mean, the one thing you do have to value is he really is the offense. Coach Mike Malone allows them to play a lot of random through him and allows him a lot of freedom in reads that he creates. So there is something to be said about that. He's a really good, it's odd to say point guard, but a point guard from the center spot. He makes the plays happen.
Yeah. I'm bringing this up. It's going to sound a little bit random. Blake Griffin had knee surgery to clean up his knee. And I was thinking, I had this conversation. I was at FS1 and we were talking about top 10 players in the league. And I was looking to find a way. In fact, I had Blake Griffin among my top 10 players in the league. And it got me to thinking of the distinction between Kevin Love and Griffin. Because there was a time where Kevin Love, when he was in Minnesota and he was putting up just ridiculous numbers, that he was considered a top 10 player. And I always argued against that, largely because those numbers didn't produce playoff spots. They weren't even in the hunt for a playoff spot. And yes, Detroit got a playoff spot in the Eastern Conference. It's a little bit different than the West. But if in comparing who Blake Griffin was this year as a player versus Kevin Love at his very best in Minnesota, to me, there's no comparison. Blake Griffin was a much better player this year in Detroit than I ever saw Kevin Love as a player in Minnesota.
Yeah, I honestly wouldn't even compare the two.
I'm just talking about as playmaking fours, as fours who were the centerpiece of their respective teams.
They're not in the same class, bro. And I don't want to disrespect Kevin, but those are we're talking apples and oranges. Okay. Kevin's a guy that, yes, he can go out and get his numbers and lose, but on a championship team, this is tough. You're going to take the ball out of Kevin's hands. He's more of a complimentary piece. And if you look at Blake's really going to have to refine his shooting. But me and you talked before the year about why I told you I was so high on the Pistons, and you didn't really agree. But I said playoffs, dude. Like they're playoffs. And imagine if he had a little more help, or that knee was healthy. Maybe they make a little more noise. But Blake has a real ability to pass and play make. And he's an interesting player, Rick, from playing with him, because he's so good you don't not have the ball in his hands. But sometimes that's your biggest problem, that it's just you wear Blake out.
Yeah.
He's so good. So, Dwayne Casey really has his hands full saying, how do I get the most out of this lineup? And he did for what he had. This was a coach of the year type of performance that Dwayne Casey's not getting credit for, but how do you get the most out of this organization? And maybe I'm speaking more to a personnel aspect, because I told you there's no one in the Eastern Conference that can guard him. And if you put a big guy on him, Drummond's got your small forward and he's pounding out the glass and everybody's going small. They're just getting bigger.
Right. Okay. We have a number of playoff matchups that we're going into. Where do you want to start? We've got Boston and Milwaukee, and we've got the Raptors and the 76ers. Those are already lined up in the Eastern Conference. What are you expecting with Boston and Milwaukee?
I think it's going to be a tough series. Boston looks like they're back. The best thing that could have happened to them was for them to play the Pacers, because they literally had to grind. We know they can run with you. We know they can score, but they had to grind. They got gritty again. And the Pacers are that type of team. So if you don't grind with the Pacers, you'll go home.
Yeah. And
they swept them, and everybody's not paying too much attention to that. But that was still a very well-coached, hard-playing, fine-tuned basketball team. I got Boston in 6, and everybody's gonna be all upset. They don't want to believe it, but I was like, "Yo, Milwaukee's going home in the second round."
Dude, I have Boston in 5. So if they're upset with you, they're just furious with me. And I may be overstating it. Maybe Milwaukee is a little bit better than I'm giving them credit, but I think that Detroit lulled them into a false sense of confidence, and Boston's a completely different animal. They're going to be able to be physical with them. They're going to have multiple guys that they can put on Giannis. Giannis isn't going to have the same airspace or the same freedom to get where he wants to on the floor against Boston. And then it's going to be a struggle. And I just need to see that evolution. Maybe I'm not giving Giannis enough credit for how mentally tough he is and how much his game has evolved as a playmaker. But that's what I need to see. And Boston's going to force him to demonstrate that.
Yeah, he is. Rick, I think we're both in accordance here. I think I'm Milwaukee's favorite analyst when it comes to that. But I am interested to see because this kid has grown. But, I mean, you just at that level, man, you don't out-athletic everybody. Right. And he's going to have some plays. He's going to have some big dunks. But the one thing you have is not just the size and strength, but there's a lot of discipline between Horford and Baines that are just going to make him have to work and work and work.
Yeah.
And, you see moments, even in the Detroit series, the guys get out of his way. You're not going to see that from the Celtics, man.
Right. That's the thing. And I was curious how you thought that Boston was going to match up with him. Because you almost have to put Horford on him, right? I mean, are you going to have Horford on Lopez? And
Baines guarded him very well.
Baines did? Or Baines has?
Him very well. Yeah, last year. Baines guarded him very, very well.
Yeah.
Now, I think he had a couple moments where he just tried to jump over Baines and dunk on him like some crazy. And Baines just kept standing in there, man. Kept jumping, kept fighting. So it's interesting to see. I want to see what's going to happen. Yeah. But, if those guys get dunked on, they're going to keep playing. They're going to keep playing. But, that court starts getting really tight in the playoffs, man.
Yeah, it does. I am glad to see that Milwaukee, whoever it was against, that they did win a playoff series, because I think that's important for the growth and the evolution of Giannis, is to know what it feels like to play a closeout game and get it done. So I'm happy to see that. I just don't know that we're going to see another one. The Raptors and the Sixers. We talked in the last podcast, we talked about the Sixers and the closeout game with the Nets, but it was really hard there's two things here. It was really hard for me to gauge exactly how well they're playing based on that game, because the Nets just basically set themselves on fire. The other part is, though, it feels as if the 76ers have been better when they're missing one of their guys. When Butler was out, when Embiid was out, when one of the pieces is out, it streamlines the pecking order. And maybe you get more Tobias Harris as a result of that, which is a good thing. But I just feel like when they're at full strength, I don't know that they're at full strength, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I know that is contrary to conventional thinking, but I feel as if figuring out how they keep all the mouths fed is at Ben Simmons playing with Joel Embiid out there on a full run, that they're not necessarily at their best. At least in this first series, that's what it looked like to me.
I mean, I think it's more about Ben Simmons, honestly, and Embiid, because you got two guys that want to beat up the paint. And, Embiid actually gets frustrated, even though you don't like it. I don't think he wants to be out there shooting threes. He will if it's within the flow or you back up off of him, he'll take it. But the thing about that team is they don't necessarily fit well. I do agree. Tobias Harris, that's what makes him an excellent pickup, and you had to go get him because he can play off the ball. But, maybe you're mixing up some of those lineups and saying, hey, Ben or Jimmy, you got to sit, or Joel, we'll try to, fix these minutes sparingly.
Yeah.
And for me, the big key is Ben Simmons' success because, if he gets downhill and you got to help, he's an excellent passer. And I feel like if you get to a point where you take the ball out of his hands and he's on the floor, he's wasted space. Yes, he's a good defender. Yeah. He's a good rebounder. He's going to push in transition, but he ends up being wasted space. And Jared Dudley was absolutely right in what he said. Yeah. And it was interesting because Philadelphia had to be, it's funny. This shouldn't be happening, but in 2019, I feel like the media screwed the Clippers in Game 3 because everybody went off about Kevin Durant being guarded by Patrick Beverley, and he goes and torches the Clippers. The comments were made about Ben Simmons, and the media goes crazy from Jared Dudley, and Ben Simmons has his best player performance ever. Yeah. But Rick, I don't think he has that. If that doesn't happen, I think he just kind of goes and floats, and I have a problem with that.
Okay, well, I'm going to defend my media members, my fellow media brethren here. By the way, you're part of the media now, technically, in that sometimes these stories are generated by the media, and sometimes they're overblown. But in both of the cases that you stated, Jared Dudley is the one who started that with Simmons. I mean, he started it with the statement. It was a true statement, but it's where Philadelphia took it. And I think it was the fans who put the missing sign out on Ben Simmons. It's social media, not let's be clear on which media we're talking about. Social media is the ones that basically pranked Ben Simmons in the way he started that series.
Well, I guess we'll swerve it to say that as a media member, you are highly influenced on what you take and what you focus on from social media now. There's a connection between fans and influencers that wasn't there before.
I hate to say you're right, but you're right.
See, prior, Rick, you've been, at the network for a long time, and you would have to do your reading, your research, and you had to find a story and say, hey, Bucher, what's the story tomorrow? The producer gets you, what's your story? What's your angle? What do you see? And you're telling what you see. Now you go on Twitter. Now you check a trend. Now you see an analytic, and it blows up the story. So I will correct that statement. You're right. It blew up via social media. And I also agree with you. He didn't say anything wrong. As a matter of fact, Ryan Holland said it a year ago, and nobody wanted to hear it. And nobody said, dang, Ryan was right when they got knocked out in the second round.
Oh, but nobody's ever going to come back and tell you, you were right. If you get a handful of those over the course of your career, consider yourself ahead of the game.
Yeah, I was this outlier last year, and I was like, what are you guys watching?
Yeah. Well, and I believe that that's going to come and bite them again in this series because, again, when it comes to matchups, Brooklyn just didn't have the physical ability to match up with Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. Size-wise. They had no answers. They had to counter. They were David against Goliath. They had to do what they did well and hope that the Philadelphia did not respond. But once it became a physical battle, it was over. Toronto's an entirely different animal when it comes to that. They've got resources. You can use Serge Ibaka to draw Joel Embiid out to the perimeter. You got Marc Gasol as a big body to put on him. You got Kawhi Leonard and Pascal Siakam to put on Ben Simmons and make things challenging on him. They've got an embarrassment of riches that I believe is going to make the game really difficult for the straws that stir things for the Philadelphia 76ers.
Yeah, there's not going to be a lot of scoring. I mean, Toronto's arguably, the best, if not a top two team defensively. And I would argue to kind of maybe give the edge to a Golden State defensively just by experience. We've seen them in Game 7s by potential. But that's the best, personnel in the league defensively because of the styles that you brought up. That, Marc Gasol was brought in for Embiid. He was brought in for these big time centers. He was brought in for the Giannis's, of the world.
Yep. All right. The other item that we have to hit, because we now have a Game 6, Warriors and Clippers. Are we going to see a Game 7? What do you think the Clippers can do here at home? Do you think they can get another one out, or are the Warriors going to impose their superiority and get back on their game and finish this off?
They've been bad at home of late. What's tough here is that, by the way, NFL draft is going on. I know we're an NBA show. I mean,
yes.
we normally say
I want to hit this. I want to hit the NFL draft before we say goodbye.
Regardless, man, I don't know if I'm touched by it or blown away, but a lot of these NFL players, they're literally crying as they go to the podium as Kyler Murray's wide receiver, Marquise Brown, just gets drafted. There's a lot of these guys crying. So this is this is probably the most emotional draft I've seen.
Yeah. What do you make of that? How do you explain that?
I don't know if these kids are hardworking or they're getting more in touch with their feelings nowadays. I'm not sure what's going on, man. But there's a lot of these guys crying on their way to the stage.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's a lot of circumstances, but apparently this kid, came back from surgery to kind of get where he was going. Marquise Brown of Oklahoma.
Yeah, I'm just looking here. What you have any thoughts on? Taking the Kyler Murray with the number 1 pick, to me, is the Arizona Cardinals rolling the dice in a huge way. Huge way.
Absolutely. And you weren't able to trade Rosen prior going onto it. Haskins dropped. I was surprised by the Giants pick. They got the kid from Duke. That was ridiculous. But if you're the Cardinals, you take a chance on Kyler Murray because you don't have a great offensive line. You want to spread things out. David Johnson is one of the top catching running backs out the backfield. And you say, you know what, we may not be a big offensive line, but we got a guy who's not going to get touched. And, we'll roll him out the pocket. We'll do some things that aren't necessarily conventional. And you're going to try set a new trend in the NFL of just movement. And he was absolutely dynamic at Oklahoma. And it's interesting to see what happens once this kid actually gets some weapons.
Yeah. What do they do with Josh Rosen now?
He's got to be moved.
Well, obviously,
they're shopping him. He's got to be moved, and it's crazy that he wasn't moved. And Josh Rosen, arguably he makes some of the best reads, pre-snap reads of a young quarterback in the NFL, but they couldn't protect him.
Right?
There was nothing that wasn't his fault. And I don't know if they're saying that, Josh, we like you, but we don't have the offensive line to protect you in scheme and system. And Josh Rosen is an NFL quarterback, by the way. He's a really, really good player, Rick. So he's taking a lot of heat. But I think that if you get Kyler Murray, you're telling me you're shifting everything you do as an organization. If you're the Cardinals, you're committing to a different style.
Yes, you are. But look, when it comes to the NBA, you never see trades. You see trades completed after the draft, but they've already been agreed to before the draft. Because once the draft happens and you've taken the guy that is replacing the guy that you're looking to move, I don't see how his trade value doesn't drop as a result of that. Everybody knows now that the Arizona Cardinals have to move Josh Rosen. And so I would imagine that his trade value plummeted as soon as they took Kyler Murray.
That's a really good point. And who knows what you end up getting in return. And this kid was a first round pick, but that shows you what they see in Kyler Murray. Like, hey, this dude can change everything we are doing offensively. And we're gonna, like, you draft Kyler, like I said, Rick, like, dude, that's a commitment. They see something that, I don't want to say nobody else sees because we're all intrigued with Kyler Murray, but they're committed to something big, man. You pass on your first round pick, you essentially throw him out the window.
Well, this is what's bizarre to me, speaking of the quarterback.
And real quick, Rick.
Yeah.
This could be a deal where a quarterback gets hurt and Josh Rosen is sitting there ready. So, in the NFL, you never know what could happen. So it's not necessarily the worst scenario.
Well, this is what's bizarre to me is that, because the big question, and it always comes back to the quarterback. So Kyler Murray goes first. I'm still wrapping my head around that, but everybody was anticipating. Vegas had the odds on that Kyler Murray was going to be the first round pick. I mean, the number one pick. Daniel Jones. The Giants do take a quarterback. They do take him high, but they take Daniel Jones when all of the experts that I was hearing were saying that Dwayne Haskins actually was the best quarterback in this draft.
The entire draft.
And he goes to the Redskins, who generally don't get it right, but it looks like they may have done it better than anybody else. This is what I am trying to wrap my head around because of everything that I heard coming in. Now, Jones has, he has all the measurables that you would want with a quarterback. 6'5.5", he's 220. I mean, he looks good. He looks like a quarterback in the team picture. But
yeah, man, and I talked to a lot of NFL experts outside of our guy, and they are in love with Haskins. And just like, dude, like the guy can play. He can read defenses. He's got a big arm. He's a dog. He's a leader. He can do a lot of the little things. He's committed. Like he's in the playbook. Like right. The guy can play. Like there's no questions.
Yeah. So what do you remember from your draft night?
You got to understand, I was a guy that I could have went everywhere from 10 to the Sonics at the time to 50 of where I went.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. In short, my agent, Todd Ramazan, did a good job because the Bobcats had a rule at the time that said, if you don't work out for us, we won't draft you. That's a standard. And if you remember, Brandon Roy was really supposed to be Adam Morrison. And Brandon Roy handcrafted his way to Portland because he wanted to stay home.
What do you mean he handcrafted it?
He didn't want the Bobcats to take him with that. Was it the number 2 or the 3 pick? And he did not do the Bobcats workout. Went to Portland, essentially got to stay home, close to home, and he was gold. So the Bobcats, Adam Morrison works out. Adam Morrison ends up being taken, and Adam Morrison wasn't a bad pick, but they wanted Brandon Roy, but it was just like, nope, we're old school. This is how we're running things. And if you disrespect us, we're not getting off on this foot.
So as you watch this draft or any draft, does it bring back the feelings that you had the night that you were drafted?
It does. The emotions kind of stir. I'm a little upset right now. I'm a little irritated, Rick. The emotions stir. No, I'm happy for the guys, but you talk about the hard work and everything that it took really to get you there. But no, the emotions stir up, man. The excitement.
Did you have a promise?
What do you mean promise? Like a drive? Like if I get
somebody
drafted,
said, "Hey, you're not going to fall beyond this," or we're looking at taking you here. What was your expectation going in on where you might go?
I thought I would be no later than the second round. I went back to the Nets twice. Lawrence Frank did all but pull me in the office and we're drafting you. Lawrence Frank and those guys. I forget the GM at the time. He's a story GM. I'm horrible for forgetting his name. All but said, yes, Thorne. Yep. All but said we're drafting you. I went to Portland twice. Nick McMillan pulls me in the office and dude, we're taking you. I'm doing the draft work out there. Man, you can shoot. You're big. You can jump. They're yo, this is a no-brainer. We're in. The Nets, and I'm trying to think if there is another team. The Sonics, I was excited there. I'm trying to think if there's another squad, but I was brought in several times, told hey, nah, we're taking you. You get a vibe on certain things.
Sure.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I had the owners come up to me. Wow, look at your body. You worked hard. I thought this was happening.
So you're at the ESPN zone in Anaheim, and when you do get the call, who do you get the call from? Or did you get a call?
If I'm not mistaken, I talked to Michael Jordan that night and Bernie Bickerstaff.
Oh, well, that's at least a consolation prize, isn't it?
Oh, heck yeah. I kicked in the gear there. I was good. I'm what? Because I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
Or what would happen. But yeah. Talked to Jordan that night, Bernie, welcome. And then it was get on the plane. We'll see you tomorrow. I'm what? We'll see you tomorrow. Get on the plane. Bring your stuff. What's crazy, Rick, I flew out to Charlotte, right?
Yeah.
To just kind of find a place to stay, get acclimated, get my stuff together. And they're yeah, well, you have workouts tomorrow. So I had to have my stuff packed for me and shipped out. My dad had to go to the house, pack my stuff, put it in boxes, and ship it out.
Wow.
And I just stayed kind of with what I had.
Wild. It feels like they should tell you to be prepared for that, right?
Well, yes, and that's that old school, mentality that Bernie Bickerstaff, brought to the table. We love him for what he did. Yeah, just like, hey, like, nope, this is what we're doing. Wow. Now, did you, from what you've talked to other guys, were they in the same boat? Well, it's a 50th pick, in the second round. I'm not guaranteed, much like a lot of these football guys. I'm not a guaranteed contract, so I had to go and show that I could make the team, and they pretty much treated me like it. And Todd did a good job because he got me a 2-year deal with the team option. They're like, unless you screw something up, we're not going to waive you. You're not going anywhere. Right. And that's kind of really how that worked. But Bernie tried to kind of non-guarantee me, and he's like, and Todd just pulled his card like, come on, Bernie. You're glad Ryan even fell this low. Like, you're going to guarantee his contract, and then we'll do a team option, and pretty much he's not going anywhere. Right. So, what was your emotional reaction since you didn't cry? I was looking. A true story. I was looking mad, and I felt like that guy. Yeah. Because I looked around the room, and like everybody's celebrating, like, "Oh, Ryan Hollins!" And I'm just during a commercial. I'm heated. I am heated, Rick. So no highlights on TV, no like nothing, bro. And keep in mind, so Adam Silver at the time, he's doing the second round. I'm like, oh, who's this schmo doing the draft? And Adam's my guy, by the way. I'm like, man, I don't even call by Stern, bro. I don't get called by Stern. And then check this out. I mean, dude, like I was seriously like frustrated, like, and so I have a talk with my agent, right? Mm-hmm. And with Todd, and Charlotte had the third pick, everywhere from the third pick and the 50th pick. There's nothing in between. There's no mid-range there. And I just remember, telling my agent, I'm like, I'm not going to be the third pick. I'm like, why am I going to work out for Charlotte? I want to go there. Yeah. And he I don't want to say begged me, but he convinced me to like go and work out. And I was like, I don't want to go there. He's like, Ryan, you never know what's going to happen. Yeah. You need to go there. You need to do this workout. And I worked out with like, I almost want to say Dale Ellis's son, if I'm not mistaken, or somebody's son, the kind of like favor, okay. And then another European guy. And I mean, I just murdered them. It was like, dude, they're not even NBA players, but I grinded, and I knew the play that I had in the workout that got me going to the draft is that we're playing a one-on-one drill or something, and the ball goes out of bounds. And I literally I dove literally through some pads to go and get the rebound, to get the loose ball. And it was like, you're drafting me. Wow. But it was like, my mindset was like, I'm not going to be there, but I was on a mission, man. I was locked in. Right. Nice job. Way to give yourself that basement. Might not have reached your ceiling, but you built yourself a basement. I had a hit list. You talk about a chip. I had a chip. Really? That like everybody gets on Aaron Rodgers. I had a chip. Oh, yeah, I didn't think I was good enough. Okay. Well, there you go. That worked for you. All right. That does it for this episode of Bucher and Hollins, subsidiary of Bucher and Friends, part of the United WeCast network. If you enjoy the show, or even if you don't, give us a rating wherever you get your podcasts. iTunes, just hit the stars. Remember, if you'll do us a favor, screenshot that and send it to @BucherFriends, and you will be eligible to win some prizes. We've got a swag bag that we're going to be giving out. I think we need about 15 more ratings, and then we will have another drawing for a prize, and we'll continue that as we go forward. All right, that does it for this episode. In our next episode, I will be rejoined by my man Will Blackman, and we will break down everything. We'll get his take on Kyler Murray, Dwayne Haskins, and everything involving the NFL draft. That will be in the next podcast. In the meantime, as always, thanks for listening.